Women are not mysterious. They're just operating with psychology that most men have never learned to recognize. Here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. And once you understand these 7 principles, you'll stop misinterpreting their behavior and start seeing the real motivations driving their decisions. The first secret is that women process social information differently than men do. Their brains are literally wired to pick up on micro-expressions, tone shifts, and environmental details that most men completely miss. When a woman says, "I'm fine," but her voice changes slightly, she's not being confusing. She's already processed that you didn't notice something she expected you to catch. Understanding this means you stop taking her words at face value and start paying attention to the full context of what she's communicating. The second secret is about competition. Men tend to think women don't compete, but that's backwards. Women compete constantly. They just do it differently. Instead of direct confrontation, they compete on social positioning, alliance building, and resource access. This is why women often invest heavily in their social circles, and why group dynamics matter so much to them. It's not gossip for entertainment. It's information gathering and relationship maintenance that directly affects their standing. The third secret involves emotional labor. Women are socialized from childhood to manage not just their own emotions, but the emotional climate around them. This means a woman is often tracking multiple people's feelings simultaneously while managing her own. When she seems tired or withdrawn, it's frequently because she's been doing invisible emotional work all day. Most men don't even realize this work exists, let alone how exhausting it is. The fourth secret is about mate selection criteria. Women's brains are evaluating long-term viability in ways that operate mostly outside conscious awareness. This isn't about being calculating. It's evolutionary psychology at work. She's assessing stability, consistency, emotional availability, and whether you can handle responsibility. These evaluations happen fast, and they run deep. A man's status matters, but consistency and reliability matter more than most men realize. The fifth secret is that women often use indirect communication as a strategy, not a flaw. When a woman hints instead of directly stating what she wants, she's frequently testing whether you care enough to figure it out. This is a compatibility test. She's checking if you're paying attention to her specifically, or just going through the motions. Direct communication would skip this crucial information. The sixth secret involves female intuition, which is real but not magical. It's pattern recognition operating at high speed. Women notice inconsistencies between what people say and what they do. They track behavioral patterns over time. When a woman says she has a bad feeling about someone, she's usually picking up on subtle misalignments that her conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. The seventh secret is about vulnerability and trust. Women often appear guarded because they're assessing whether it's safe to be vulnerable with someone. Trust isn't automatic for them. It's built through consistent behavior over time. When a woman finally opens up, she's made a significant decision about your trustworthiness. Understanding this changes how you interpret her initial reserve. These 7 principles aren't rules. They're patterns that explain why women behave the way they do. They're not manipulative or confusing. They're adaptive strategies shaped by biology, neurology, and socialization. In the next section, we're going to go deeper into each of these and show you exactly how to recognize them in real interactions. So let's start with the first pattern, the social intelligence advantage. Women's brains are literally wired differently when it comes to reading people. Their mirror neuron systems are more active, which means they're naturally better at picking up micro-expressions, tone shifts, and emotional subtext. This isn't something they're taught, it's neurological. What this means in practice is that women often know what you're feeling before you know it yourself. They catch the hesitation in your voice. They notice when your smile doesn't reach your eyes. And here's the thing that confuses a lot of men. They'll sometimes call you out on something you weren't even aware of. You think they're being overly sensitive or reading into things. Actually, they're just operating with better data than you are. The second pattern ties directly to this: selective vulnerability. Women tend to reveal different layers of themselves depending on context and trust level. This gets misread as inconsistency or manipulation. A woman might be completely open with her close friends, but reserved with colleagues. She might share emotional struggles with a partner, but keep up professional boundaries at work. Men often interpret this as her being fake or two-faced. But it's actually strategic self-protection combined with that social intelligence we just talked about. She's reading the room and adjusting accordingly, because she knows instinctively that different environments require different presentations of self. The third pattern is what we call emotional labor awareness. Women are typically socialized from childhood to manage not just their own emotions, but the emotional climate around them. They're often the ones noticing when someone's upset, checking in, smoothing over tension. This isn't weakness. It's actually a sophisticated skill set. But here's where men get confused. When a woman stops doing this emotional labor in a relationship, men sometimes feel abandoned or think something's wrong. What's actually happening is she's setting a boundary because emotional labor is exhausting and it shouldn't be one-directional. The fourth pattern involves what researchers call strategic ambiguity. Women often keep certain cards close to their chest, not out of deception but out of necessity. They've learned that revealing too much too soon can be used against them. They've learned that being too eager makes them seem desperate. They've learned that showing too much ambition can trigger backlash. So they reveal information strategically, which can feel like they're being evasive when really they're being protective. These aren't character flaws. These are survival mechanisms developed over years of navigating a world where their safety, reputation, and opportunities are constantly being evaluated more harshly than men's are. The fifth pattern is what we call collaborative competition. Women tend to compete indirectly rather than directly. They rarely come out and say they're competing with someone. Instead, the competition happens through subtle social maneuvering, alliance building, and strategic positioning. Men often miss this entirely because they're used to direct competition. But women learned early that direct aggression gets punished, so they develop more sophisticated methods. When you understand these patterns, you stop seeing women as mysterious or confusing. You start seeing them as people operating with different tools, different pressures, and different information than you are. The patterns aren't about being better or worse than men. They're about adaptation. They're about survival in a specific context. And that context matters more than most people realize. Take the way women navigate social hierarchies. Men often compete through direct confrontation. They establish dominance through visible challenge. A man might disagree loudly, make his position clear, and move on. Women typically can't afford that luxury. Confrontation carries a different cost. It risks social expulsion in ways it doesn't for men. So women developed something more sophisticated. They read micro-expressions. They track alliances. They understand who holds actual power versus who appears to hold it. They communicate disagreement through implication, through strategic silence, through what they choose not to say. This isn't manipulation. It's precision. It's the difference between a sledgehammer and a scalpel. Both work. One just requires more finesse, because the stakes are higher. A man who loses a confrontation might lose status. A woman who loses one might lose her entire social network. That pressure shapes how you think. It shapes what you say and what you keep private. Here's where it gets interesting. Women are also acutely aware of their own visibility. They're watched more, judged more harshly for the same behaviors men display without consequence. So they develop what researchers call impression management. They curate what they show you, not because they're fake, but because they're strategic. They know that vulnerability can be weaponized against them. They know that ambition reads differently depending on who's watching. They know that the same confidence that makes a man seem competent can make a woman seem aggressive or difficult. This is why women often appear to shift personalities in different contexts. With their friends, they're one way. At work, they're another. With family, something else entirely. Men do this too. But women do it more consciously, because the cost of being misread is higher. It's not that women are more deceptive. It's that women are more aware of how they're being perceived and more intentional about managing that perception. And then there's the layer of physical vulnerability that shapes everything. Women are statistically more likely to experience violence, harassment, and assault. That's not an opinion, that's data. And that data lives in their nervous system. It affects where they walk, what time they go out, who they trust, how they read a stranger's intentions. A man might see a friendly approach as just that. A woman might be running a threat assessment simultaneously. She's not paranoid. She's calibrated. She's responding to a real statistical reality that men simply don't face at the same level. This constant low-level vigilance is exhausting. It's like running background processes you're not aware of. And it shapes personality in ways that look like caution or anxiety to someone who doesn't understand the threat model she's operating under. But it's not weakness. It's adaptation to a genuine risk. It's intelligence applied to survival. The deeper pattern here is this. Women aren't mysterious because they're fundamentally different from men. They're complex because they're solving a different equation. They're managing more variables. They're playing a game with steeper consequences. When you understand that equation, the behavior stops looking irrational. It starts looking smart. It starts looking like exactly what you'd do if you were operating under the same constraints. This is where most men get stuck. They see the behavior. They judge it as manipulative or unclear, but they never ask what problem she's solving. Because once you ask that question, everything shifts. You stop blaming her psychology, and you start understanding her strategy. Take what looks like emotional withdrawal. A woman pulls back, goes quiet, stops initiating. A man reads this as rejection or punishment, but she might be solving a different problem entirely. She might be protecting her energy, because she's learned that certain conversations drain her without resolution. She might be creating space to see if he notices her absence. She might be testing whether he'll chase or whether he'll respect the boundary. These aren't games for game's sake. They're information gathering under uncertainty. Or consider what looks like mixed signals. She says she wants independence but gets upset when you make plans without her. She says she doesn't need help but resents you for not offering it. Again, most men call this contradiction. But she's not contradicting herself. She's managing competing needs. She wants autonomy and she wants to feel chosen. She wants to be self-sufficient, and she wants to know you'd sacrifice for her. These aren't incompatible if you understand the actual equation. She's not asking you to read her mind. She's asking you to pay attention to context. This is the fourth secret. Women often operate with what you could call conditional consistency. Their behavior changes based on how safe they feel, how valued they feel, how much they trust the outcome. A woman might be completely different with you than she is with her friends or her family. That's not dishonesty, that's adaptation. She's modulating her presentation based on what each relationship requires. And here's where it gets deeper. This conditional behavior isn't weakness. It's actually a form of intelligence. It's the ability to read a room, to adjust, to protect yourself while staying connected. Men often mistake this for instability. But stability and rigidity aren't the same thing. A tree that doesn't bend breaks in the wind. A woman who doesn't adjust gets hurt. The fifth secret follows directly from this. Women tend to be more aware of relational power dynamics than men are. She's thinking about whether she has leverage, whether she's vulnerable, whether the other person could hurt her if they wanted to. This awareness colors everything. It's why she might test you early on. It's why she might keep certain cards close. It's why she might seem to move slower or more cautiously. She's not being difficult. She's being careful. And that carefulness is rational when you consider what she stands to lose. This is what separates understanding from judgment. When you see her behavior as a rational response to her actual constraints and her actual risks, you stop taking it personally. You stop interpreting it as a reflection of how she feels about you. You start seeing it as information about what she needs from you to feel safe enough to fully show up. And that shift in perspective changes everything. Because once you understand that her guardedness isn't rejection, her testing isn't games, her need for reassurance isn't neediness, it's survival. You can actually meet her where she is instead of resenting where she isn't. This is where real intimacy becomes possible. Not the fantasy version where she's always available and always certain and never afraid, but the actual version where two people see each other clearly and choose to stay anyway. Here's what matters most. These 7 patterns we've covered, they're not universal laws. They're tendencies born from real pressures. Some women experience all of them intensely. Some barely experience any. Some experience them differently depending on the man, the context, the phase of her life. The point isn't to put women in a box. The point is to stop assuming their behavior is irrational when you simply haven't understood the logic yet. When you look at her choices through this lens, you'll notice something. She's not trying to confuse you. She's trying to protect herself while also wanting connection. She's not trying to manipulate you. She's trying to get her actual needs met in a world that often punishes her for being direct about them. She's not playing hard to get. She's genuinely uncertain whether it's safe to be easy to get. The men who understand this don't complain about women. They get better at reading situations. They get better at communication. They get better at creating the kind of safety and consistency that allows a woman to actually relax into a relationship instead of staying perpetually braced for disappointment. And here's the thing. That's not weakness on your part. That's not her winning some invisible game. That's both of you winning. Because a woman who feels genuinely safe doesn't need to deploy these defenses. She can be direct. She can be vulnerable. She can actually invest. So the real takeaway isn't that women are complicated. It's that women are responding to real circumstances that men often don't see. Once you see them, once you understand what she's actually protecting against, you're not confused anymore. You're informed. And informed men build better relationships. That's the difference.